Hey everybody, this is Matthew Soltesiak and you're listening to Not the Same Old Lions podcast. Using my sportscasting background, I speak with a variety of guests and interview key players to gain more insight on what makes this team go. As the Detroit Lions enter a new gritty era, we'll look beyond just the kneecaps when it comes to the analysis. Welcome to another episode. In this episode, we take a look back at the Detroit Lions' home opening matchup with the Seattle Seahawks. We discussed the 37-31 loss, and yes, we're going to touch on what went well, turning points in the game, concerns and takeaways, as well as any major storylines. So let's get to it, Lions fans.
Hey, this is Rob Rubik. Stay tuned for more great insight from This Is Not the Same Old Lions podcast.
I'm joined today by James Cook, senior sports writer for the Traverse City Record Eagle. You can also hear him on the Get Around podcast. It drops on Mondays. Good to have you here, James, as always.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course, I wish it was going to be a little bit more celebratory episode here, but it is what it is. And, you know, I guess that phrase, you can't win them all, kind of rings true today, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a long season. On Lions message board, I see people wanting to jump off a cliff and everything. But, it's a long season. The Lions are 1-1. They're still in first place in the NFC North. There's always a bright side.
There's, at his post-game press conference, Coach Dan Campbell said it is not a sprint, it's a marathon. The goal is to go 1-0 every week. We know they weren't going to go undefeated, but there isn't a game you saw on the schedule that you don't think they're capable of winning. And after they won that Chiefs game and we saw opportunity for improvement and the way we saw Seattle play in their first game, we're like, hey, this could be right for the taking, especially with those offensive tackles out. But I got to say that the big key that I talked about in the game preview was Geno Smith factor. And he looked nothing like himself from week 1 into week 2. Week 2, he looked like himself from last year, and that was not good for the Lions.
No, it wasn't. And I was a little disappointed that they didn't try to take more advantage of those tackles being out. And then even for a drive or two there, the center was out too. It was former Lion Evan Brown. So then they were down 3 offensive linemen at points during that game, and the Lions didn't really dial up a whole lot of extra pressure. They had 1 or 2 times where they brought some DBs, and that actually worked and brought some good pressure. But they didn't do it a whole lot. They pretty much relied on the front 4 and Hutchinson to get home, and the Seahawks were countering that with quick plays.
Yeah, I couldn't figure that out as well, if that was part of a scheme that they wanted to contain Geno Smith or just the front 4 couldn't get through. But there did not seem to be nearly as much pressure as I think most Lions fans were expecting going into this game from that front group, knowing how banged up the Seattle front offensive line was.
Yeah. I would have expected a lot more extra pressure, trying to take advantage of having a pair of backup tackles out there. So Aaron Glenn's taking a little bit of heat on some of the message boards that I check.
Well, that's I'm not surprised to hear that based on some of what I observed. And, the secondary as well had some things that went well for it, and there's some things that didn't go so well. Let's just start by talking about what we liked in general. You can probably hear from my voice. I just got back from Ford Field not too long ago, and I will tell you the atmosphere was pretty amazing there. It was loud. A lot of people said their ears were ringing as they were leaving the place. My ears were not ringing, but my voice is a little, it's seen better moments, and this isn't one of the best, but it was well used. And we got a number of false starts there by the Seattle Seahawks. So the crowd noise did play a factor into it. So that was encouraging to see that atmosphere and how packed Ford Field was.
Yeah, it sounded loud on TV even. I imagine in person it was even more so. I heard it broke a record for the highest decibels at Ford Field history at the game. And I don't know, was there a lot of ski masks there, or was there not? I think they intentionally tried not to show them on TV because they really didn't.
It was sporadic, I will tell you that. Like when I was walking in and walking around, I didn't see them at first, but then it felt like late in the game, I started seeing more of them than earlier in the game. And I looked around and saw some. There weren't as many as I was expecting, maybe based on what I was seeing on social media, but there were definitely ski masks there and people were wearing them.
I saw one photo of a guy who was had a ski mask on, and he had a sign up that said "No more brown paper bags."
Yeah, I won't say that. Maybe I did hear a few of those brown paper bag comments towards the end of the game there after overtime. But again, that's a little bit of an overreaction to what we saw. Some things that I thought went well. I thought Jared Goff played well. Now, he had that pick six, and he had a pick six a year ago in this exact same game against Seattle. So that was not good. Now, Goff in the postgame presser said he wished he would have thrown the ball a little bit over. Coach Campbell said they had to go back and watch the tape and see if that was Goff's fault or if it was the route wasn't run quite the perfect way. Either way, Jared Goff shouldered the blame for that. But other than that, and you can't, obviously, other than that, lots of things happen in a game. But Goff was 28 for 35, 323 yards with 3 touchdowns. Those are some pretty darn good stats.
Yeah, he played really well. And I'm not 100% sure if that interception is his fault or not, or if Gibbs kind of got a little farther ahead in the route than he was supposed to. Who knows? But yeah, there goes that potential record for the longest streak without an interception. Ended up being the third longest in NFL history. So I mean, that's pretty darn impressive, especially for a quarterback who in his Rams days was kind of known for throwing interceptions and throwing them at bad times.
Well, even the first half of last year, he wasn't doing that great with the turnover category for the Lions. So he really made some changes. And if you're looking for a silver lining in this, folks, no one's going to be talking about the streak for the next 6 to 8 weeks.
That is also true.
So the other thing I got to say I liked, the very first touchdown catch was by Josh Reynolds, and he took a hit when he caught that. I liked the way our wide receivers played in general, as well as Sam Laporta. I thought they all did a pretty good job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Laporta is another one of those bright spots, and Craig Reynolds stepping up as the number 2. You didn't see them targeting Marvin Jones a whole lot in this game, and you even saw a little bit of Antoine Green.
Yeah, and that was Josh Reynolds. You were talking about Josh Reynolds that stepped up.
Josh Reynolds, yeah.
It's okay. We got a couple of those guys.
Yeah, more than one Reynolds.
But you're right, Marvin Jones. He didn't even show up in the stats after the game.
Yeah, he was active and he played. And I saw him running a few routes, but I don't know that they ever really threw the ball his way.
Goff's top 3 receivers were Amon-Ra St. Brown, Josh Reynolds, and the tight end Sam Laporta. And of course, you had Khalif Raymond, who had that great catch on the flea flicker play and had another one as well. And then actually, I guess you had Jahmyr Gibbs with 7 receptions, but he only had 39 yards on those. So yeah, that kind of starts telling the story of maybe who Goff is leaning towards. And you're starting to see an immediate impact 2 weeks in a row now from Sam Laporta.
Yeah, and Gibbs was the most targeted player. He had 9 targets. That's more than Amon-Ra St. Brown had. He brought in 7 of the 9. Amon-Ra brought in 6 of his 7. But they used Gibbs a lot. I think after Montgomery left with that thigh injury, I think Gibbs kind of showed that he wasn't necessarily ready to be the workhorse running back. He couldn't run between the tackles when they went for it on 4th and 2. He didn't get it. So I think they really need Montgomery to heal up quick and get back there and have them as a 1-2, and that Gibbs is not ready to be a 1. He's still a very good number 2, but not ready to be the number 1 quite yet.
Well, they even brought Craig Reynolds in to kind of assume the role of David Montgomery. And one thing I think a lot of people don't always notice is David Montgomery is a pretty good blocker. And so that's something that we can get to as well, as about a turning point with Montgomery going out. But any other things that you thought were positives? I know we've got some things that did not go well, and we're going to get to those, but something else that you found a little bit encouraging.
I like the play of the linebackers. Jack Campbell was active again, making a lot of stops. Alex Anzalone had that one huge play where he was able to bring down Geno Smith for that loss that cost the Seahawks the ball essentially, and they had to punt. They lost yardage. They kind of gifted the Lions a timeout by them not having the need to use a timeout there because Geno ran around long enough that the 2-minute warning happened during that play. So the clock stopped right after the play. So that was just a pretty huge play. He also had 7 tackles, 5 of those were solo in the game. Cam Sutton looked good, I think, in at corner, and hopefully next week, Emmanuel Mosley comes back. If they didn't put him on IR, that means they didn't think he was gonna have to miss 4 weeks. So it's 2 or 3. He's already missed 2, so they must have thought he would be back in 3 weeks. So if Mosley comes back and is that other starting corner, that's an upgrade there too, because Jerry Jacobs kind of struggled this week.
Yeah, I would say that having Mosley coming back would be huge. He had that setback last week or so we'll have to see what happens with that. The Lions' run defense, I actually thought was pretty solid as well. If you look at the numbers there, I mean, Seattle did not do a whole lot running. Kenneth Walker had 43 yards on 17 carries, and Zach Charbonnet had 16 yards on 4 carries. Geno Smith had a few rushes for 20 yards total. But I was like, hey, that rush defense wasn't too bad at all. And so that was something that did encourage me as well.
Yeah, that was good. I mean, they had to kind of just almost in the second half give up the run and just throw the ball. And then like I said, they were just doing the quick hits, short counts with Geno Smith, so he didn't hold on to the ball too long, let the defensive ends get home. The run defense was solid.
So let's look at the things we didn't like. That's what we got to get to. Maybe we should have started with this. I don't know, but sometimes it's nice to start with what went well, and we can maybe do a full circle on some stuff. But I guess the first drive I didn't like. There were so many penalties on that first drive. You can debate whether they were all warranted or not, and I think that's a theme that Lions fans are going to talk about throughout this game. Coach Dan Campbell talked about it in his post-game press conference. He said that they knew this crew calls a lot of penalties, but he was not willing to blame them for the game or for changing things. But the first drive, the penalties kept the drive alive. And I want to say that was about a 7.5-minute drive by Seattle to open the game. And so that was tough.
Yeah, it took about half of the first quarter, I think. And then the Lions came back with their own kind of pretty good sustained drive to tie it up with the Craig Reynolds or the Josh Reynolds touchdown. And then but yeah, then there was the non-holding call on the final play.
Yeah.
In overtime where Aiden Hutchinson was obviously being held, and that allowed Geno Smith to escape and then find an open receiver, and Lockett scores the game-winning touchdown.
Well, and I also want to point out, I'm not going to go too far down this rabbit hole with the calls by the referees, but there was one where Seattle was going in, and I want to say it was like 1st and goal from the 7 or something like that. And they called a penalty. They called offsetting penalties, face mask on the Seahawks, and then pass interference on the Lions. But if you look, the Lions player, if you're even saying he caused pass interference, it's because he was face masked into the guy. And so it really should have been a one-way call, not a two-way call. And then that would have backed Seattle up 15 yards. And that might have changed things right there.
True. Yeah. I mean, Jacobs should, best case scenario in that situation, Jacobs should just, as soon as he knows that Metcalf's going to get called for the penalty for grasping the face mask, should have just let him go. Because basically the play's over. They're going to get called for a penalty and it's coming back.
And then again, I don't even think Jacobs knew what he was doing at that point of being thrown off balance with that, just trying to recover to stay with things. So that was a really tough one because the offsetting thing really benefited Seattle in that situation. We talked about the lack of pressure on Geno Smith by the defense, and that's something that surprised us. And I don't know if that's a concern or not. I mean, we'll get to injuries later because the Detroit Lions players were dropping in this. There were so many times of injury that we saw people leaving, whether it was Haloti Vaitai, if it was James Houston, you had David Montgomery, you had CJ Gardner-Johnson leave for a little bit. I think Kirby Joseph left for a little bit. And there might have been people I didn't name, but there was just all kinds of people going in and out.
For a while.
Yeah, he left, came back, then he left again. I mean, yeah, there was one play. Vaitai and St. Brown were both down on the same play, and so I know Seattle lost Metcalf for a little bit and stuff as well, but the Lions seem to have getting a little banged up, and that was a little concerning right there.
Yeah, and hopefully none of those are long-term injuries. It sounds like James Houston is going to maybe go on IR and miss
Yeah,
4
that's what I was
weeks.
seeing.
And it sounds like maybe Montgomery is going to miss a game or two.
Okay.
With that, like I guess he's got a bruised thigh.
Yep.
During his postseason or post-game press conference, he said that those kind of injuries generally take a couple weeks to heal. Whether he means that they take that long to heal while just resting, or if you're going to play through it, that it'll take a couple weeks. I don't know.
So, watching the game, I was at the 200 level in the end zone. So you get to see a pretty good view of the way things develop across the field. And I got to say, the big concern I had is the reason Seattle won this game to me is the tight end play by Seattle. I mean, yeah, Metcalf and Lockett got theirs, but Noah Fant caught 4 passes on 4 targets. Will Dissly had 3 on 3. Colby Parkinson had 2 on 3. And it just seemed that anytime they needed 7 or 10 or 12 yards, Geno Smith could find a tight end, and they were open. Most of them weren't even contested catches. They were just open. And it's like that play was there all day. And that was probably one of my biggest concerns because, like you said, Cam Sutton played a solid game. I don't even remember seeing him get beat on a play. You didn't hear his name getting called. Yes, Jacobs did get, he made a few plays here and there that he would probably like to remake and make them a little bit better. But just that tight end play action stuff just really seemed to strike a nerve with me. Did you notice any of that?
Yeah, they were able to find those guys on a pretty regular basis. I mean, it's about 140 yards, I think, between those 3 tight ends. And the Lions use their tight ends pretty effectively. I mean, Sam Laporta had 5 catches for 63, but Wright and Mitchell didn't have anything.
Right. And then if those 3 tight ends are getting that, well, then you got Metcalf and you got Lockett and you got Smith and Jigba. I mean, that's like 6 guys. And yeah, nobody went crazy. Lockett did have 2 touchdowns, but they kind of kept things for the most part in front of them. It was a little bit surprising to see no adjustments made and that continued throughout the whole second half.
Yeah, I think part of that was that, they just were pretty much throwing to Metcalf or Lockett, whichever one was on Jacobs, and kind of staying away from Sutton a bit, especially as the game went on. It seemed like that. I think getting Mosley back really helps that defense.
It does. And, having Tracy Walker helps because when CJ Gardner-Johnson had to go out for a little bit, or maybe it was Kirby Joseph or both of them.
They both missed a few plays.
Yeah, Tracy Walker came in, and it was like, wow, pretty thankful to have somebody like him to come right in and do that. So I was thankful for that. I don't know if I would put this into a concern, but I guess what I would like to say, maybe it's a don't like, I don't know. I would have liked to see the Lions attempt a 48-yard field goal early in the game. They went for it on 4th and 4. I love the aggressive nature of our team. I love the flea flicker play. I love the creativity. I just was feeling, and again, you know what? Hindsight's 2020. If you make it, you're great. And if you don't, everyone's going to second guess you. I get that. I don't fault them for later in the game when they went for it on 4th and like 4 or something and we didn't get it. And that was somewhere near midfield. But we were within field goal range. And if you don't trust your kicker to kick a 48-yard field goal the second game of the season in the first half, when are you going to? And it seemed like that would have been a good point to put 3 points on the board. We didn't get it. And, those 3 points could have been big later. But that's something that just, again, I would have gone a different direction. I am not the coach. There's 1,000 things Coach Campbell is more qualified for than I am. But I guess that just surprised me with that decision by him.
Yeah, it would have been nice. I think that I think he's using kind of the analytics of it. Of how many times when we give David Montgomery the ball is he not going to get 2 yards, and with him he tends to get pretty much always positive gains, especially behind that line. Obviously, they had to change some things at that point in the game. Vaitai was still in there, but I mean, they had Taylor Decker out and Matt Nelson playing in his place.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, it was like 3rd and 2 or 3rd and 3, and then it became 4th and 4. If it had been like 4th and 1 or 4th and 2, I like the analytics differently for that. So anyway, I like the aggressive nature. I didn't get that, or why we didn't go for the field goal then. And I guess I know Coach Campbell said it's a feel thing. I just was surprised with that move. That's all.
Yeah. And with
Anything?
Campbell, it doesn't surprise me.
No, it shouldn't surprise. He's very aggressive. He might be changing the NFL on the aggressive nature of coaching and going for it. But we're going to probably set another record again this year.
Yeah, a number of times they go for it on 4th down. Yeah, I think so.
Anything else that concerned you or that you didn't like?
Well, I mean, all the injuries obviously are concerning. David Montgomery, maybe as much as anybody. Well, I guess Vitae, that one could be something too. I mean, it was where an offensive line or a defensive lineman fell on the back of his leg, and so we haven't heard like any updates on that one. So far they haven't said anything about it, whether it's something serious or not, whether they think it must some time or be back next week or what. So if he's out, that's another big loss.
It is. Coach Campbell said that they would know more in the next day or so about that one. But yeah, that's a really big loss because that's one more. That would be 2 offensive linemen that are injured.
Yeah, and well, and when Graham Glasgow came in for him, he looked a little bit more like the Denver Broncos Graham Glasgow than he was when he was with the Lions the first time around. And that's
not good. No, that's not good. So hopefully that's a one-time thing as far as the way he looked, and hopefully Vitai's back on the field soon. David Montgomery, I'm going to say this is a major storyline, is him getting hurt. I also think if he doesn't come out of that game in the 4th quarter, if he's not out, I think that changes things a little bit. That last drive, the Lions, I thought they would move the ball with a little more haste when they were coming in and out of the huddle and stuff. I mean, they were down 10 with 3.5 minutes to go. It was 3 minutes and 8 seconds to go when they got that touchdown to cut it to 3. And I think we had the ball. I expected them to move a little quicker during that drive. So that surprised me a little bit on that.
Yeah, I think it changes things too, because that the second time they went 4th was the 4th and 2, and that was when they gave the ball to Gibbs, and he just didn't get it. I think Montgomery probably gets that.
Yeah, and I also would say the encouraging thing about the Lions was they were down 10 with 3.5 minutes to go, and they came back to tie it. So I got to give them credit there. But I'll be honest, with 8-9 minutes to go, and it's a 10-point game, and we ultimately got the ball back from Seattle. But I'm sitting here thinking the feeling inside of me was not confidence at that point. The way I'd watched the game play out. I mean, the pivotal turning points where you had the fumble by David Montgomery coming out the second half. And, we had a 7-point lead, and I turned to the guy next to me, I'm like, man, if we can at least get a field goal on this drive and go up by 10, I'd feel really good. Well, that didn't happen. And then obviously the pick 6, not only be an interception, but going to the house for a full score, those really hurt as well.
Yeah, they did. And a big thing for the Lions last year was winning the turnover battle, and they didn't do that today. I mean, they had 3 with essentially with Amon-Ra St. Brown's fumble on the last play of the first half, I think it was. And the 2 that they had were big. The other 2 were big. I don't think Amon-Ra was going to score a TD on that last one anyway, so that one really didn't matter.
Right.
But Montgomery's fumble and the pick 6 were obviously things that really changed the complexion of the game.
Yeah, those were big things, and crazy enough, could have been overcome. I mean, when Anzalone brought Geno Smith down, that was huge. The place got so loud. You had this feeling that the Lions were going to get the ball and go down and score a touchdown and on that last drive. And, there was I think one pass that got dropped, like the second or third play over the middle. It would have been an 8 or 9 yard gain. And then it seemed we just kind of stalled after that. When it went to overtime, you're kind of like, I don't know. But for a moment, it was like, even though everything went wrong, they have come back and we might just go down and win this game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the I guess the other weird thing to me was on that last possession of regulation, it seemed like Campbell was playing for the field goal, which is unlike him.
Yeah, he did say that he didn't feel like the time clock was the issue. He thought that it was them not converting, not picking up the yardage. But I see what you're saying. Like the play calling might have dictated that. Is that what you're thinking? Like,
Well, they just seemed like, they took the little, 8-yard passes over the middle, that take time off the clock, require you to use your timeouts up. And that just seemed, if you were going to go for the touchdown, you're either going to throw a much longer pass or something more in the intermediate, but to the sidelines. So you don't have to use those timeouts and give yourself a couple more shots at the end zone. Whereas they
well,
just were looking to get themselves into field goal range, which tied the game and took it to overtime, but it just didn't seem like Campbell's style to play for the field goal.
yeah, that surprised me too. I guess actually that brings up a great point. Other than that flea flicker, it didn't seem like the Lions took a lot of deeper shots in this game. And I guess I expected a few more of those. It was mostly medium range shots.
Yeah, I think part of that is, they don't have, obviously they don't have Jameson Williams, but
Yeah.
and Craig Reynolds is a good receiver, but he's not necessarily a guy that's going to blow the top off of a defense.
Josh Reynolds, the Craig Reynolds
Yeah,
bug struck you again.
I don't know why I keep doing that.
That's okay. But yeah, so, we're not going to win them all. We knew that. This is one that I thought we had a really good chance of coming in and winning. It would have been great to open the season with a home opener. Unfortunately, it's a third home opener loss under Dan Campbell. Obviously, our team is much more talented this year than we were those first two. So this one hurts a little bit more, if you ask me. But it seems very similar to the game from a year ago against Seattle.
And yeah, and I think maybe in the long term, this can be a good thing in that maybe the players don't buy into what people are saying about them after the Kansas City win, and maybe they refocus a little bit. Maybe they were reading their own headlines a little bit, and so maybe they focus on that. But I think most Lions fans, though, before the season, if you asked them if they'd be okay if they were 1-1 after 2 games, they would have been fine with that. They would have assumed that it was losing to the Chiefs and beating the Seahawks, but they would have been fine with 1-1. And you've got Atlanta coming up next week, which is a winnable game. Atlanta, what does Atlanta like to do? They like to run the ball. What has Detroit been very good at this season? Stopping teams from running the ball.
Well, and yeah, those are all excellent points. When we did our season preview and we kind of went through the schedule, I told you I would not have been shocked if the Lions started the season 4-2, but started 0-2. And it's a lot nicer having beat Kansas City, that we have this loss, because now we're not 0-2, we're at least 1-1. And so it is a long season, and it is tough to have lost this game, but it is better than being 0-2. And then again, as we look at Atlanta, we don't know what to expect from them. We're going to find out a little bit more because they obviously beat Green Bay by a point, so that was helpful. But yeah, the Lions aren't going to be too overconfident at this point anymore. Whether they were or weren't, they probably weren't. I guess one thing I want to see is an upgraded play from the secondary, because it's 2 weeks in a row that there were a lot of guys open. And that with our upgraded secondary, I didn't expect to see this much. So that kind of surprised me a little bit. That's something that I'm a little concerned about coming out of this, but I'm very hopeful that it can change.
Yeah, and if you look at the standings, I mean, there's only 6 teams in the NFC that started out 2-0. So it's, like I said, the Lions are in first place in the NFC North. No NFC North team won this week.
I'll take that. I mean, other than the Lions, I'll take everybody else losing.
Yeah. So, I mean, and of the 6 2-0 teams, I mean, did anybody predict Tampa Bay would be 2-0?
No, not even Tampa Bay fans.
Or Atlanta.
Right. So we'll see what we got with Atlanta coming up next week. I guess the big storylines, the big takeaways from this game is injuries. We got to see what's going to be up with Houston. He's going to be out some time. Vaitai, hopefully he is not. David Montgomery. And then there were some other guys banged up. I mean, Aiden Hutchinson came out for a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see how everybody's doing, how Josh Paschal is, right? Because he didn't play. And hopefully he'll be coming back soon.
Yeah. The Hutchinson one looked like he took a shoulder pad like right to the chest, and just looked like it knocked the air completely out of him. So that one I'm not too worried about. But yeah, those other Montgomery, Vaitai, Houston, losing those pieces would be big. At least they had Romeo or Guara come in and had somebody else at defensive end that can be, a contributor. But he doesn't have the same pass rush moves that James Houston has.
No, he doesn't. So that'll be good to have Houston back at some point. If that is the case, it's a big loss to not have him here. The other thing is I want to see our running game improve. And I know we didn't have the exact same offensive line. I know David Montgomery left early. I mean, we had 102 yards rushing, I believe, for the game. If Montgomery's in there the whole game, we may end up with more yards. But it seemed like we're not able to rely on the run yet the way we could last year. And I'm hoping to see that kind of change a little bit because that, too, opens up the passing game a little bit more, even without Jamison Williams being in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And makes the play action. Jared Goff is much better off of play action when the play action is successful. So getting that run game going, getting that fixed. Having Decker back hopefully next week to help with that. And then hopefully Vaitai is healthy as well.
All right, James. Well, Troy Lions are 1-1. This wasn't quite as fun to do as the previous episode, coming off that Kansas City Chiefs victory. But there we are, 1-1, as we're going to head into week 3. And as you said, we are tied for first. That's better than last year. Do you have any final thoughts or comments before we get out of here?
The sky's not falling, I guess, is the thing. The cupboard's still pretty stocked.
I can't disagree with those comments at all. Thanks again for joining us, James. Remember, you can catch James at therecord-eagle.com. Find his work out there. Also, the podcast, the Get Around podcast drops on Mondays. Check that out as well, folks. Thank you so much for tuning in. You can find all the episodes at notthesameoldlions.com. If you have questions about the Lions you'd like us to answer, email me, Matthew at notthesameoldlions.com. If you're listening on YouTube, please hit that like button. While you're at it, tell your friends about the show. Please subscribe regardless of your listening platform. And until next time, stay gritty, my friends.